Do you ever wonder about this? As we get older, get more experience under our belts, do we get more cynical or do we actually become more principled? I mean, does all that youthful idealism just fade away or does wisdom really truly come with age? Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to look at the news, see these massive corporate scandals, and just feel kind of pessimistic about people, right? When you see powerful, super experienced folks at the heart of these ethical disasters, it really makes you question where morality even fits in when it comes to success.
But look, those huge scandals are one thing. What about the rest of us? You know, the millions of us making countless little decisions every single day at our jobs. Does that daily grind, the pressure to just get ahead, slowly chip away at our ethics? Or does it actually make them stronger? That's the real mystery we're going to unpack here.
So, to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to look past all those dramatic headlines. We need to zoom in on the normal, everyday ethical choices people face in the real world.
You've probably heard this one before. It's kind of this cultural myth. The idea that young workers, hungry to move up, are way more likely to bend the rules a bit. That their idealism just gives way to a more, let's say, practical and maybe less ethical way of doing things. But is that what actually happens?
To answer that, we first need a way to think about how our ethics even evolve, because it turns out our sense of right and wrong isn't just fixed in place. It actually develops over time.
And this brings us to this key idea, moral development. The thinking here is that morality isn't static. It's a lot like learning to walk or talk. Our ability to know right from wrong grows and gets more sophisticated as we mature. It's really less of a trait you're born with and way more of a skill you develop your whole life.
So, the psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg laid this out in stages, and you can think of it like climbing a moral ladder. Down at the bottom, on that first rung, it's all about self-interest. What's in it for me? Or how do I not get in trouble? Then you climb up to that middle, conventional level. And here, we start looking outward. We care about social norms, fitting in, following the law just because it's the law. But at the very top, that post-conventional level, our thinking is guided by these deep, abstract principles, a personal code of ethics about justice and what's right, even if it goes against the rules.
Okay, a moral ladder is a great theory, but let's be real. How on earth do you measure that? How do you figure out where actual people are on this ladder when they're facing real choices at their jobs?
Well, this brings us to a really fascinating study that tried to do exactly that. Not in some sterile lab, but in a place most of us go to every week, the supermarket. So a researcher named Bahauddin Mujtaba decided to put this whole idea to the test in the world of retail. He surveyed a whole bunch of supermarket employees and managers, from the young new hires all the way up to seasoned veterans, to see how they handled ethical dilemmas. And the way he did it was pretty brilliant. Instead of asking that classic question, what would you do, which, let's face it, usually gets you the right answer, the survey just laid out some realistic scenarios. Stuff like, padding an expense report or promoting a buddy instead of the person who actually deserves it. All people had to do was approve or disapprove of what was done. It was a clever way to measure their real ethical stance, which gave them a personal business ethics score.
All right, so the scores are in. What did they find? Did the results prove that old myth right, that experience just makes us compromise? Or did something else entirely happen? Let's check out the findings.
The results completely flipped that old assumption on its head. It turns out the younger, less experienced employees were actually the ones who were more willing to compromise, more willing to accept those morally gray practices, especially when they felt pressure from a boss. Meanwhile, the older or more experienced managers, they consistently scored higher on the ethics survey. They had a much stricter, more sophisticated view on all of these moral issues. And when they dug into the numbers, age itself was a huge factor. And this lines up perfectly with that moral development theory we just talked about. The data is pretty clear. As we get older, we're not just collecting birthdays, we're collecting the life experiences that help us climb that moral ladder, moving from just following rules to really focusing on principles. But it wasn't just about age. It was also about the kind of experience. Having management experience was a really strong predictor of having higher ethical scores. And this suggests that the actual process of dealing with real-world problems, of making those tough calls and seeing what happens down the line, well, that's what really builds up our moral sophistication. The research also pointed to another factor, gender. Now, this is a really complex area, but some theories suggest that people might come at moral problems from different angles. For instance, a care perspective might focus on relationships and making sure no one gets hurt, while a justice perspective might be more about fairness and applying the rules to everyone equally. The study suggests these different ways of thinking can also shape our ethical decisions.
Okay, so we've busted a myth, we've looked at the data, but what's the big takeaway here? Why does any of this matter for you?
I think the most powerful thing to take away from this is that your ethical character isn't just set in stone. It's not this thing you either have or you don't. Ethical sophistication is a skill. It's something that can grow with age, get stronger with experience, and something you can actively work on. The point is, we don't have to get more jaded as we get older. We have the power to actually get wiser.
And that brings us to one last thought to leave you with. If every challenge, every single decision, every mistake is really a chance to take another step up that moral ladder, what's the most important ethical lesson your own experience has taught you? It's a really powerful question to think about.